Welcome back to the Listening Well podcast. This is episode 8, social media. I'm Brittany.
And my name's Jenna.
So we're going to get into a lot of good information, I think, on social media, and some of it can be helpful, but it can also be harmful. And so kind of unpacking all of that.
Yeah.
Jenna, if you want to take us away.
All right. So obviously, social media is like the different platforms like Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, all those different things. In 2021, there was 4.3 billion people that had a social media account, which is more than half of the world's population. And on average, they would spend 2.5 hours each day on these platforms. So there are benefits to social media. The fact that you're able to keep up with current events, you're able to connect with others that you may not have been able to, like, necessarily, because it keeps you connected with people who like may live across the state from you or anything like that. And then it can also improve just like social support networks. So it's like if you follow someone who has the same experiences with you, it can be really like therapeutic, and having just that knowledge of like, hey, like they have the same experiences as me, and like I'm not alone. But it's important to realize that social media connections are not meant to replace real world connection. And so it's important to remember that like in-person contact with others is important because it triggers different hormones within your body that help to reduce stress, make you feel happier and healthier. I mean, you can kind of think of how like COVID was, and just like how difficult it was at that point in time when we just couldn't have those connections that we needed.
Going back to one of the earlier episodes of relationships and just being wired for connection, and online connection cannot, like you said, it's not meant to replace in-person human connection with one another.
Yes. And so although there's positives, there's also quite a few negatives. So some of the negatives include how you can feel inadequate about your life or your appearance. A lot of the times you can compare yourself to others, especially like if you're seeing all of these images online of different people, it's hard not to compare yourself to others. And then there's something called fear of missing out, which is FOMO. This is how like social media exasperates feelings that others are having more fun or living better lives than you. So it's like you have this fear that you're missing out on something. And social media just kind of really increases that because of the fact that like you're seeing all of these people go on trips or anything like that. And it just kind of makes you think like, oh, well, this is my life. And again, just kind of that comparison game.
Yeah. I've talked to 2 people just in this past week who have really, really battled that comparison game. It's real. I mean, we don't often, if you're on social media, you don't normally post the normal things. You post the glamorous things. You post the best side of yourself and or your family. And it just creates, I think, a false narrative of what reality is. But it can be really easy to get sucked into this comparison game of, oh, they can afford this kind of house, or they drive this car, or they just went on this elaborate vacation, or you go down the list, XYZ, they look so successful. And it can just be a very real dangerous kind of trap to be caught in. If not careful.
There's also the isolation aspect of it. So high use of social media has also been shown to increase feelings of loneliness, even though like you may be interacting with people online. those who spend more time on social media actually feel more social isolation. And so we talked again.
Isn't that interesting?
About how isolation is very harmful to us as human beings because we are wired for that connection. And then there's also the aspect of cyberbullying.
Oh, yes.
And how social media platforms are often used to spread hurtful rumors, lies, and abuse that leave lasting emotional scars that these people can just hide behind a screen. And there's definitely a lot of research behind how harmful it can be in the long run. I mean, it's just another segue into how someone can go down this line of anxiety and depression and all of these other things. And then there's also the aspect of if you're spending too much time in front of a screen, especially if you're on the lower end of age, it can actually alter and impair your brain structure and development. And so like the World Health Organization, for example, has actually made very strict guidelines about screen time for children because of this. And just like the effects that they have on like cognitive skills and brain development, all of those things like that. So when we talk about like social media addiction, so obviously like you can just be using social media and that can just be kind of like here and there, but then there's also something actually called social media addiction, which is also recognized by the World Health Organization as a addiction within their international classification of diseases. And so addiction is a long-term condition that often leads to relapses and involves a strong desire to seek and use a substance or engage in behaviors. It affects how the brain works and communicates by causing changes in the overall brain structures. So it's this excessive and compulsive usage of social media that affects daily life and overall well-being. A lot of the times it causes you to want to constantly be checking for updates, feeling anxious when offline, and then also just real-world relationship and responsibility effects. So you're losing that real-world connection and you're allowing social media to kind of take over your responsibilities, so you're not getting work done, things like that. So when we talk about this addiction, part of it is that it stimulates the brain's reward system, and that releases the hormone called dopamine. And dopamine is that feel-good chemical that is connected to activities that bring you pleasure and feelings of a reward and achievement. And so I think it's really awesome because we talked about this in Grace Group the last week, and how social media, there's this like loop, and how the dopamine can just continuously be, it's called like a dopamine dump, and just like a hit. It's almost like taking a hit of a drug. And that's why it can be so addictive. That's why you're constantly just scrolling. They call it doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling, yes, it's real.
And then like the other part of it is that when you get likes or you get follows, that's again just another way that the dopamine is triggered. And that's why social media, when they have been creating all of these different platforms, that's what they're focusing on, is how we can trigger your dopamine, how we can get you wanting to come back to this, so that way you continuously engage with it.
Absolutely. The developers of social media platforms, as well as applications, but apps, games, and different things literally have used the slot machine as kind of their model for developing these types of platforms and programs. And they're taking advantage of the fact that we will buy into their product and literally become hooked on it. And I love that you brought in addiction. So the teenage brain, if you're a parent, even if you're not a parent, this is just a really, really great book by Frances Jensen. And Frances talks about what you just said, Jenna, about how the brain gets wired through social media and just kind of any internet accessibility for teenagers, for adolescents. And literally there's research in here that has been done that adolescents, teenagers, will literally, when forced to go on a phone fast, literally have the same withdrawal symptoms as somebody that's addicted to heroin or a hardcore drug, because the brain doesn't distinguish between this is a drug or this is social media. It processes it all the same. And so I think this is a really, really important conversation that is not just helpful for the adult, but is super incredibly important for our kids and for anybody working with adolescents to be aware of. It's important for our schools to be mindful of. It's important in our homes, in our churches, really any place that involves kids, to be aware of just the dangers. And this isn't a like throw the baby out with the bathwater type thing. There are good things to social media, like Jenna had talked about. We're not saying do away with all of it, but if you can do it in moderation or wisely, and we're going to get into boundaries and different things here in a minute, but I think recognizing and just being aware and knowledgeable of what exactly it's doing to our brains and our bodies, and it is harmful, and it happens so subtly. It doesn't happen like, oh, I think I'm gonna wake up and become addicted to social media today, or I'm gonna be addicted to doom scrolling today. Like we don't wake up with those thoughts, but it happens over time if we're not careful, and it happens easily.
And I think too, like, to kind of put it into perspective, Dave did a really good job of explaining it in his sermon this past Sunday about how he just like noticed he was called by the Lord to give up social media for Lent, and he noticed in his downtimes at commercials and things like that, he was just automatically picking up his phone to look at social media, to do all of these different things. And I had given up social media last year for Lent, and I noticed that as well. And I just recently, like about 3 months ago, started bringing social media slowly back in, and I still noticed that I was going back to that. And so I actually added limits within my settings on my iPhone. I was able to say like, okay, I only have an hour of social media, of YouTube, of all of these different things that I'm allowed each day. And then once that's up, I'm done. And so that's just one way that I've tried to do better in regards to making sure that like I have this limit. Anyway, that was a segue.
No, that's good.
And so who does this hurt the most? Brittany already kind of talked about it. It's the adolescents. It's these teenagers. We're giving these teenagers a phone that obviously, like we said, it has benefits. Don't get us wrong. But adolescents, when they are developing, they are having not only so many physical changes in their bodies, they're going through puberty that causes so much self-esteem difficulties, but also they're going through neurological changes that again just continue to attack that self-esteem and that sense of identity. So
and that's the time the brain is going through the most changes.
Yes.
Is going from a child brain to an adult brain. And so you already have a lot of rewiring and different things, hormones and things that are happening within the brain. And now you add in a phone or access to internet, and it completely hijacks some of those connections and networks and things that the brain is trying to do and develop.
And like we talked about, like neuroplasticity, for example, it's like with these kids, if they're having difficulties with self-esteem, social media is just that constant loop, that constant connection of I'm not good enough, or I don't have as good of a body as they do, or I'm fat, or I'm too skinny, and things like that. And they're constantly getting these thoughts, and those are the thoughts that are going to be the strongest. And it's hard, especially as an adolescent, because you don't have your prefrontal cortex to be able to sit there and tell you that's not true, because of the fact that that's not fully developed.
Right. Yeah.
And so
reasoning and logic are not there yet.
No. I mean, like, it's starting, and it's like it's better than what it would have been as a child, but it's still not fully developed whatsoever. Not only that, misuse of social media, overuse of it, can actually decrease your cognitive function and shorten your attention span. And so that's what you're seeing a lot in like schools nowadays, is that kids do not have the attention span anymore because of the fact that they're so used to these 15-second videos.
Oh, yeah.
And you just are used to being able to scroll. And then like, I know personally, I do this where it's like, if they don't get my attention fast enough in like 5 seconds, okay, I'm done. Like, our attention span is so poor because of the fact that we're just constantly getting these dopamine hits and these things that just trigger this reward system.
Yeah, it's no longer it's no longer instant gratification. It's constant gratification. Constant. Just that feedback loop, reinforcing it. And that's what dopamine, it's not just a reward. Dopamine is a reinforcer hormone. And so it wants to reinforce that feel good hormone. So that's why we keep going back to the thing that makes us feel good, because our brains tell us, hey, do this because it feels good, because you had a moment of happiness. And so many things, Jenna. I hope for those, it just dawned on me, I hope people weren't thinking we were going to talk about like ethics of social media and like what we post and those types of things. That would be a whole other podcast that we're not going to get into today, because I do think there is importance of how we respond, on social media, how we carry ourselves, how we do that. But we
more so wanted to look at how social media can like trigger difficulties with, or like amplify like symptoms of mental health. I think that's kind of where the avenue of where we were going with everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what else?
Okay, so what can we do? So information on monitoring and limiting. So there's multiple studies that have been made about ways to monitor and limit social media use, or just screen time in general. So for example, this one study had 143 college students from the University of Pennsylvania, and they split the students into two separate groups, one that was limiting their social media and one that just continued to do what they normally did. That's kind of like the control group. And they found within 3 weeks that the limited group showed significant reductions in loneliness and depression over the 3 weeks. And that those who did less than 30 minutes daily showed the most significant improvement. Another study of 6,595 U.S. adolescents did a report over their social media use for 1 year. And again, they found that in the reports, people who had mental health challenges consistently increased with higher levels of social media use. So they did different segments, so like 30 minutes and less, 1 to 3 hours, 3 hours to 6 hours, and the more and more that they increased, the worse and worse their symptoms have gotten. And again, they found that 30 minutes or less had the greatest advantage. And then another one of 230 undergraduate students were randomly divided into using social media for only 30 minutes daily or continuing their usual use. After 2 weeks, the self-monitoring group showed clear improvements in their mental health, including less anxiety, depression, loneliness, and FOMO. And so some suggestions. I will always say, advocate for yourself and do your own research, because obviously, like, we can do our research, we can kind of give you information of what's out there, but I think it's also very important whenever like you are looking at these things to do your own research as well.
Absolutely.
But some suggestions that I found was setting specific limits. Choose how much time you want to spend on social media daily and stick to that limit. Use built-in timers or other apps to track and limit your usage. So for me, that's what I use. I use that 1 hour mark, and once I have that, I can't use social media anymore. Schedule social media breaks. So set specific times during the day where social media, you're not allowed to use it. So things like personal time, work, create no phone zones, set up areas where social media is not allowed. like the bedroom or your dining area. So that way you can have these healthier spaces for relaxing and connecting with others. I think also to segue off of that, we so often use our phones as a way to relax. And in reality, it's not. Like when you are getting that dopamine hit and everything like that, you do this doom scrolling for 3 or 4 hours or however long you do it. And by the end of it, you think like, oh, like I'll have more energy or anything like that because I was sitting here and I wasn't doing much and I was just relaxing. But it's not actually allowing your system to shut down and just like rest and digest, which is your parasympathetic system. So that was just a segue off of that. Turn off notifications, turn off unnecessary notifications to stop the urge to check your phone constantly. Those notifications, when you hear that chime or anything like that, instantly you're picking up your phone because of that dopamine hit. Those notifications, again, are just that instant gratification that you're getting. Engage in offline activities. Try new hobbies and activities. Through college, personally, I found that I had literally no hobbies. I was either doing schoolwork or I was on social media. And I was just like, okay, where are like hobbies? What did people used to do before social media was around? Like before TV was around? Because that's literally all I'm doing. And so I have found just like different crafting things, reading, walking, you love your birds, like things like that. Like it's so important to have real world things outside of screen time, TV time, anything like that. And then practice digital detoxes. So take regular breaks from social media. You can do this for a few hours each day, or you can do this for an entire weekend. So like Dave said this Sunday, he's taking social media out of the equation for Lent. And I think that's such a great way of doing it, especially if the Lord's calling you to do that. I've done that and I have seen so many important changes in my own life. I mean,
benefits for sure.
Yes. And like it helped to be able to like take a step back finally and be like, oh, like, wow, I didn't realize how much like this comparison game was really affecting me and how much like more anxiety and depression I was feeling because of all of these things. So when I have a parent that comes to me and says, hey, my child or my teen is battling anxiety and a little bit of depression, one of my first questions is, do they have a phone? Because like Jenna just pointed out, there's so much research and harmful associations and causes from social media platforms and just an array of difficulties in social media that are impacting our kids. And so it's having those conversations with parents, equipping them. And I don't want to jump in. No, you're good.
Okay, because so this is another book, parents. Jonathan Haidt wrote this, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. And this is a fantastic book that really goes into a lot more detail that we can't hear, things that Jenna has already talked about. But in that, he says there are 4 foundational harms to giving kids and teens cell phones or tablets with internet access. He's a proponent of, if you have to give your child a phone, give them a flip phone. Like if it's a case where they have to contact you because they're, like in New York City, they're taking the subway or the bus to get to school, or they have practices. If they have to contact you, if there's an emergency and you feel better, them having a device, give them a flip phone with no internet access. So anyway, some of these four foundational harms include social deprivation, which Jenna talked about that. Listen, we are playful mammals. We are designed for connection, like we've talked about. So Nora had a hermit crab, and we found that hermit crabs, like, they have their own type of play, but like you're not gonna train or snuggle with a hermit crab. Like, you're just not going to do that. But our dog, Samantha, loves to play, loves to cuddle, loves that interaction. She's a mammal. We're mammals, and we're designed to play with face-to-face. And so he's a proponent of bringing back experiences in the real world. So experiences and responsibility in the real world. He would even argue our world is way safer now than it's ever been in person, but more harmful and dangerous online. But we've taken, especially as parents, we've taken steps to overprotect our kids from the real world, but have not taken steps to help prevent dangers in the online world. And so social deprivation, sleep deprivation is a big one. When I was going through counseling and I was not sleeping because of some different things, my counselor advised me, turn off your phone about an hour before bed so that your parasympathetic nervous system can kick in, rest and digest. So social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, which you talked about. Our attention is spans are terrible, and then addiction, which Jenna already covered. Social media does have more harmful impacts on girls' mental health than boys. However, I want parents of boys to know this. Whether you just had a baby, or you're raising a teen right now, or you haven't even entered that stage yet, these are all good things to be mindful of. There's something called sextortion. And it is unbelievable how this is impacting our young boys, our boys of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. And what that is so we have these online people. Usually they can be, they're sitting behind a screen. Sometimes they're domestic, sometimes they're in other countries. But what they do is they send a picture, if your child is friending different people on their social media platform, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram. You make these friends, and then the person will send a picture, like they'll pose themselves as a pretty girl, and it gets the attention of the boy. And so the relationship develops and it continues, and eventually the person behind the screen, usually an adult, not a woman, but usually a man, will say, let's send nude pictures of ourselves. And so the child will send a nude picture. This is called sexting, and we'll send a nude picture, and then that person says, okay, I have all of your contacts because I'm friends with you on this platform. I know all of your contacts. I need you to send me $500, or I'm gonna send this nude picture of you to all of your friends. And this is happening literally. So the Department of Homeland Security, cybercrime, there were 8,000 cases just between January and June of last year. 8,000 cases. And there are suicides of young boys and girls, but mostly boys in this department, that are related to this sextortion because they're mortified. They can't pay the money, and they have no way out, and they're fearful that these pictures are going to get out, and their family's going to know, and their friends are going to know. It's real.
Yeah. And not only that, like, to kind of just segue off of that a little bit, this is another topic that, like, I feel like we could go in so much in depth about is porn.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
You would now have access to porn at the touch of your fingers, and more kids nowadays are getting exposed to porn so much sooner and so much earlier than what they normally would have, to the point that Viagra is number one amount of Viagra is actually being sold to like 21 young adult males because of the fact that they're on porn for so long and so much that they literally need Viagra to be able to
desensitizes. Yeah. And that's so true, Jen. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, with pornography and exposure, the scary thing is that when we give our kids, our teens, phone with internet access, it's not just that they have connection to anybody. It's that other people now have a connection to them. It's not just that your kid can find anybody they want, it's that anybody can find your kid. And that's a really, really dangerous thing. And kids are being exposed much younger. I mean, it's sickening and horrifying that app developers, there's no liability or responsibility for them. And so a porn website or app or, whether even a violent video game, all the 8-year-old has to do is click, yeah, I'm 13, I'm 18, I'm 21. That's it. It's ridiculous how easily accessible the content is. And, to buy cigarettes, you have to be 18 in this country. But to access porn or play violent video games or whatever, there's nothing preventative there.
And also, I want to make the point too that to have influence of porn or anything like that, you don't necessarily have to actually go to a porn website.
No.
I have personally seen videos and things on social media that instantly I'm like, oh my gosh, because I didn't want to see that. But it just comes up in your feed and you don't even necessarily realize that that's something that is out there. I've seen videos of women who would have OnlyFans or things like that, and they're showing things that they play with. And it's awful to think about that there's these young kids who don't even recognize that they're seeing these things, or when they do recognize, then they're like, oh, well, I don't really understand what this is. Let me look into more, because they're curious. Kids are curious. They're going to keep looking, and they're just going to go down this rabbit hole that is so dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so just to piggyback quickly, I would really recommend, and Jenna's going to provide resources and things more through the toolkit that she's developing. But parents, or if you're just nerds like we are, if you want to pick up The Anxious Generation or The Teenage Brain, both of those books have really great research and resources and knowledge. In this case, knowledge truly is your best weapon of defense, because if you are aware, then you can determine the outcome. What I would say to parents is you're going to be your child's only advocate, because nobody on the other side of that phone is going to advocate for your child. Nobody is. There's no laws that are going to protect your child. And that's what's crazy is we have child laws for all these other things, but it hasn't caught up to online yet. It hasn't caught up to the cyber world. We recognize its harmful impacts through addiction, through content and things like that. We recognize it, but we're not doing anything about it yet from a legalized standpoint. And so there's a lot of work to be done yet. Parents are still the best weapon of defense for their kids. And so to piggyback real quick, from a parental point of view on what Jenna said, Jonathan Haidt, the author of this book, he makes 4 norms. These are his suggestions. 4 norms to bring back childhood experiences. First is no smartphone before high school. Number 2 is no social media before 16. He says no scrolling until the reels and things. That shouldn't happen until you're 18. So no smartphone before high school, no social media before 16. He advocates for phone-free schools, which are schools that have said, when you come in, you're going to put your phone away, you're going to lock it away, and you don't get it back until after school. There's research with schools that are just performing overall much better when we put the phones away at school. And then the last is more free play and responsibility in the real world. The best way to do this, the most ideal way to do this, is find another group of parents who are willing to do this with you. Because if you're the only parent, then It's probably not going to stick very long. But if you can find 2 or 3 other parents in your child's grade that are willing to say, hey, I recognize the harmful impacts. Let's do this together. We're not going to give our kids smartphones until they're 16. And then, in that case, Nora wouldn't be able to come home and say, well, everybody has a smartphone except for me. No, I know that's not true because we have a pact. I know for sure that these 4 other students in your grade do not have a smartphone either. So don't come home and say you're the only one. And the other thing I just want to make mention of is, what do we do with this as Christians? This is a lot of information and a lot of really good things. And again, we don't want you to hear we're anti-smartphone or anti-social media, because we're not. We both enjoy benefits of social media. But the question I think that has to be asked for each person and each family and each home is, how do we steward this well? How do we steward this so that it doesn't become an idol? Scripture is very clear. And how quickly that happens, that's a slippery slope, because my phone does a lot for me. It's not just a point of contact, it's a computer in my hands. And it can very easily become something to be idolized very quickly and unknowingly. And so recognizing the dangers of, am I putting this above the Lord? Am I putting this above my family? Am I wasting the time the Lord has given me? I mean, it just opens up a whole stewardship series of, are we stewarding our phones and our time well?
Yes.
And so that has to be addressed, as well as the idols. And I think, honestly, as a church, or churches that can really advocate for the kids and teenagers and just come alongside parents and help equip, pray for. I mean, the list is long in opportunities of how we as Christians can view social media and how we steward it, and then how we come alongside of others. Because again, if this is truly an addiction, then doesn't it need addressed even in spheres of the church and in faith communities? Just like pornography addiction, drug addiction, and everything else, we've got to begin recognizing the addictions of online platforms and being proactive to combat against it. And so I think the question we can ask today is, am I stewarding my phone well? Am I stewarding my time well? And everybody has to answer that for themselves. But is the content you're viewing glorifying to the Lord? Is it helpful in your relationship to Him? And if the answers are no, then it's time to evaluate with grace. Give yourself some grace here, but permission to explore some things that Jenna talked about with balancing time, setting boundaries, setting limits, set the timer. Have those conversations with your family and with somebody even in the church. And just don't be ashamed of it. Just recognize it for what it is, and let's move through it together.
And I think too, I personally have had some difficulties with a family member in regards to screen time and social media and all of those things. And having those conversations are really hard because these people will get very, very defensive very quickly. And so I have started reaching out to other people, because I think also that people will listen more willingly to others that aren't necessarily their family members. So take that as you will. I mean, that's just kind of something that my family has been struggling with at the moment. But yeah.
Just putting our phones down really helps us to be present. And I think we live in an age, where, we're doing this and we're together, but we're not together. So we're proximate, but we're not present. And we're going to get into on the last podcast how we respond well, how we listen well. That's the title of this podcast series is listening well. We can't do that when our phones are in our hands. We weren't designed to multitask.
Yeah.
And so to really be present and to listen and enjoy one another, it doesn't involve our phones. That's false connectivity. That doesn't scratch the itch to be fully present with somebody. And so I think we would all benefit in having some of those conversations and setting boundaries as a family, as a person, as, you know, go down the list of people who just would benefit from it. So good stuff. Well, we'd love to hear you guys' comments. Comment in the sections, and if there's something in the next, you know, few podcasts or something that we can address, we'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, we thank you for tuning in to the Listening Well podcast, and we hope that you'll come back we've got trauma, and then we've got we're going to wrap it up with kind of
responding well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like the ethics of all of this.
Yes.
What do we do with all of this? You know, the last 9 episodes, how we respond to people. So yeah. Thanks for joining.